Warning: the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
Everyone sing This is the Savage Nation. Back with you live on the air, as usual. Celebrating my 25th year this March. It's not a short time, a quarter of a century on radio. A little piece of change there. It was sort of my third career. Look where it is now. And so there's a lot in the news. And as you know, talk radio is about the news generally, or it should be. But I'm just not going to read headlines. You know, I do news, views, and reviews, which is some news, my views, and my reviews of books, movies, whatever. I know what's going on, the former employee and Trump calling her that dog, and I'm not getting involved. Personally, he shouldn't have gotten involved. To be very clear with you, enough is enough. Enough is enough. But I saw a story that I think will attract your attention, and so for your listening attention, I direct you to an article I just received before the show from the Washington Post, and here is the headline. Hundreds of accused priests listed in Pennsylvania report on Catholic Church sex abuse. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court on Tuesday, that is today, for those of you who don't know what day it is, released a sweeping grand jury report on sex abuse in the Catholic Church, listing hundreds of accused clergy and detailing 70 years of misconduct and church response across the state. Names of 300 clergy listed have been redacted from the report, blah, blah, blah. So, my friends, this report has helped renew a crisis many in the church thought it and hoped had ended nearly 20 years ago after the scandal erupted in Boston. But there have been recent abuse-related scandals from Chile to Australia, which have reopened questions about accountability and whether church officials are still covering up crimes at the highest levels. Of course, Pope Francis himself has brought about this issue of handling of abuse into question. And many Catholics want the liberal Pope to help the church regain its credibility. Now, many of you are good Catholics. Many of you are lapsed Catholics. Many of you are just not religious. Many of you are atheists. Many of you are Jewish. Many of you are, I don't know what you are, actually. Nor do I have to know. It's your business. But it's a long-term problem of abuse by a religious figure or an other authority, whether it be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. Children have been abused from the beginning of time to the detriment of their lives forever after. Their lives are ruined forever. Make no mistake about it. It is amongst, if not the worst crime a human being can commit, which is stealing the innocence of a child. It is never recovered. The child is broken forever. That child can never, ever, ever overcome it. I mean, they can walk on one leg and one arm, yes. They can crawl on that one arm and one leg, rather, but they will never walk whole again. That is how devastating child abuse is. And I think, therefore, this story is worth talking about because it's come back up again to plague us. This in no way impugns the integrity of Catholic priests in America or around the world because the percentage of abusers is rather small compared to the great number of devoted individuals in the Catholic Church who give their lives for Jesus and God. But this is a big story because the Pennsylvania grand jury report that was released today could lead the way for the state to change statute of limitation laws related to abuse. For example, Todd Frey, age 50, who says he was abused when he was 13 years old by a priest in Lancaster County, spoke to the grand jury. Remember, he is now 50. He said it happened 37 years ago. He said he told church and law enforcement officials about the abuse for years, but nothing was done. So this report will be the first opportunity to see if the priest is accused of abusing others and who in the church knew. That's what's going on. So a little boy, his life is abused. He never forgot it, and now he wants his justice. I know many of you are uncomfortable with the story because we all thought this was behind us. The church had lost hundreds of millions of dollars in these scandals. But it's really not over. So I'm going to ask you a different question for this beautiful Tuesday in August of 2018 on the Savage Nation. Were you abused by a priest or a religious figure or another authority when you were a child? I'm also going to do other topics today, which is, they're nothing to do with abuse, but if you want to talk about your abuse story, go ahead, 855-407-282. It's certainly a human interest story to me to see what it's done to you in your life and how you've coped with it. But it ties into a secondary story, which is what to do in your life if you don't believe in God. How do you find purpose? I don't think anyone's ever taken that. You know, we have a lot of people out there who tell you can find purpose in life through God, which is right. You can find purpose in life through family, which is right. But what about people who don't have God or family? What do they do to find meaning in their life? Well, since I'm a wise man, I can give you some answers that you wouldn't get from anyone else. I've sort of been around the block in some areas that others haven't. I would say that's called wisdom, isn't it? Would that be called wisdom? When a man has been through things and can figure things out for others, isn't that called wisdom? Millions of you have come to rely upon me for my insights and my wisdom, and I will not disappoint you when I talk about this, because many of you don't have a belief in God. Many of you don't know what to believe in. And so what do you believe in? What have you believed in? I mean, if you don't have anything positive to live for, haven't you constructed or adopted a solid philosophy which gives you some purpose for continuing to exist without God? Many do. So what is that? Well, let's look at this, which is in Ecclesiastes 9:10, which can be found in God, Faith, and Reason, my book on the subject. Whatever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. It's pretty devastating to believe that once you're dead, and that you can't really do anything after that. It's all over. And so while you're here, make the most of it. Maybe we should teach our children that. Maybe that should be on every schoolhouse wall. Whatever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. Many of you are arrogant in your view of life. Many of you are arrogant about human beings. You put everyone down that you see in the street. You think you're better than everybody in the gutter. Everyone walking on the elbow-thrashing level of reality on the sidewalks of New York or San Francisco, most of you walk around with a low view of them. So what do you do if you don't believe in God and you're a cynic? How do you live? What is it that you do to get through that day that gives you a reason to go on? In some cases, people decide to excel. And you set very high standards for yourself in your career or whatever you chose to do. And that itself provides a satisfactory purpose for existence. Even if there was no God, well, then to excel is to at least hurl yourself with defiance at an unfriendly universe and impose your own order and meaning upon this meaningless universe. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Do I have to repeat that? I don't think I have to repeat it. I think everyone can understand what I just said. I know it doesn't sound like ordinary talk radio fare. Why them Republicans? I got to tell you, it's them Democrats. No, sirree, Bob. Not my cup of tea. You like it, God bless you. There's room for all of us. But as a scholar and a poet and a scientist and a philosopher, that is the question I want to talk about, tied into the revelation of were you abused by a priest, a religious figure, or another authority. Also today, on a rather fun note, I think I'm going to talk about the history of the Boeing 747, which changed the world as we know it. I'm going to say, how did you jump cut to that, Mike? Because I have a very diverse interest and very versatile interest in the world. So one of the magazines I buy is one called Aviation History, and there was a great article. I actually ordered the book on the Boeing 747 and how it revolutionized air travel. It's called Farewell Jumbo. At its peak of use, this airplane revolutionized the whole world. And the story of the geniuses who built this airplane, compared to the dunces that I see in the streets of America today, is what impresses me. I keep thinking of all those men who created these flying machines like the Jumbo. Step by step, genius by genius. And I think of all of the wasted morons in the streets with their black masks on, throwing bottles and rocks, and what garbage there is today. Back in 1965, it said if you were a hotshot airplane designer at Boeing in 1965, there was only one place you wanted to be. And it was all about the geniuses. Joe Sutter, you never heard of him, Boeing's chief engineer on the 747. You never heard of him, but you know of some dirtbag who's been on television telling you about some sexually salacious story from Hollywood. You never heard of Joe Sutter. Wouldn't know who he was. You wouldn't know who Boeing's chairman was, Bill Allen. You wouldn't know who Pan Am's founder, Juan Trippe, was. None of that matters to anyone anymore. All that matters is which degenerate dropped which piece of clothing on which Hollywood street and wound up on page 6 in the New York Post. But this is a great story. Here is a radically changed airplane that in only a few years, because of no environmental stupidity, they were able to take a airplane from paper to regular airline service in 4 years. Can you imagine that today? And the first jumbo 747 rolled out at Everett facility on September 30th, 1968, forever changing the way Americans and those in other parts of the world got around. They changed the whole universe. Boeing's 747 enabled many millions of people to travel around the world with an ease and economy that was quite new in the human experience, all designed by geniuses you never heard of. Compare that to the filth that passes for intelligence today. Well, that's the beginning of the show. If it's not good enough for you, I suggest you turn the dial and listen to something about someone said this, someone said that, someone sued this, someone sued that. I'm not talking about it. This is what I'm talking about. Be here or be nowhere.
Savage.
Well, my friends, we're talking about the latest blockbuster that came out, the Washington Post, maybe an hour ago. You talk about breaking news. Hundreds of accused priests listed in Pennsylvania report on Catholic Church sex abuse. It may open up a new statute of limitations. It's a big story. I can't say it's a happy story. It's a terribly sad story for all concerned. But it led me to ask a bigger question, which was, were you abused by a religious figure, including a priest or another authority in any religion or any other authority altogether, and what did it do to you in your life? You say, well, why do I want to listen to that? It's a human story, is it not? Doesn't it go to the whole core of humanity? You look at children, see how they're raised by children. You know, we all walk around, we see children with their parents. We all know instinctually to protect children. We all have that instinct to protect the child. If we see a child run in the street, no matter who we are, don't we try to stop that child from running into the street to get hit by a car or whatever? We instinctually. Man hasn't lost that yet because of Mark Zuckerberg, have we? Has Google destroyed that in human beings as well because we didn't read about it on Twitter, how to react to a child running in front of a car? In other words, is there no human sense left in the world, no human decency? I don't know. Sometimes you wake up and think there is none the way corporations act to people. What they try to do to people, throw them in the gutter. Or put out toxic chemicals and make believe they didn't. So what's the recourse if you put toxic chemicals in a food and you know that the chemicals are toxic? The recourse is pretty clear. Big recourse to that kind of thing. Corporation knowingly destroyed someone's health and hid it from the public. Well, the courts resolved it. Look at the tobacco settlements. So people do have common sense at a certain point. Even for self-preservation, they act accordingly. If not for reasons of morality or ethics, they act for their own self-interest in a rational way. And it all actually goes back to instinct. What animal does not instinctually protect her children? Do you know of an animal in the animal kingdom? There may be a few that kill their own, I don't know. But the largest percentage of animal life on Earth, it's something to behold, isn't it, to watch a mother bear and her cubs. Any man who hikes or woman who hikes knows never get near a bear and her cubs. Stay away. She will kill you. That's an instinct, isn't it? Well, it's not too different with most mothers and their children, by the way. You know, you do see the occasional story of the throwaway children, the woman who goes to a dance party and has an abortion in the bathroom and throws the fetus in the toilet. It happened just last week. I know it's disgusting and ugly, isn't it? Yes, that's what happens when the human being loses all conceptualization of self, purpose, and God. So it ties into this whole story in some way. The sadness of children being abused, whether they be by priests or others, is something that we do have to discuss from time and again. And it ties into the bigger meaning of existence. What's the purpose, and how do you find a purpose if you don't believe in God? Well, some do it by excelling in a sport or in their field, their chosen field, whether it be the guy wants to be the best runner on the planet. He doesn't do it for God. Although I get great comfort myself when I watch a boxing match, more so in the past than today. And it's mainly amongst so-called ethnic fighters who I just, to this day, still find something chillingly amazing to watch the fighter get on his knees and cross himself to God before he goes into that ring. And the other guy does the same thing. And I often wonder, they're both praying to the same God to give them the power to beat the other guy, which is, all right, that's an irony of the observer. But the faith to go on in that ring, to take blow after blow after blow in the face and in the body, and then continue to fight and win. Why? Well, I don't know what motivates people. Some have the fighting spirit in them, some don't. Some can't get it, some can get it. Some are born with it, some learn to have it. Some are weaklings as children and then become ferocious as adults. Some are ferocious as children and have the stuffing knocked out of them and become broken as men. I've seen it all. I've seen the weak child become a Hercules as a man. I've seen the Herculean children become weakling as men as they have been broken by life. Yeah, I've seen it all. And so today we talk about it all on the Savage Nation. Phone number here is 855-407-282, 855-400-SAVAGE. This is it. That's the subject. What do you think? It's talk radio. Chime in.
Savage.
Misfire there. Coming into segment 3 of hour 1 of day 2 of year 25 of the Savage Nation. 300-plus predator priests named in Pennsylvania grand jury report. Oh, yes, there was another Muslim attack on pedestrians in the UK, but I'm sorry to mention that. I know it's very uncomfortable. A driver mows down peds in UK Parliament terror attack. And then after it was over, tourists posed for selfies with the dead people in the street. That's a result of the social media. Terror hunt. Westminster terror attack. Cops raid homes as they say suspect drove around London for hours before a Parliament attack. The 29-year-old terrorist suspect is not cooperating with cops following his arrest on Tuesday morning. He does not look like Prince Charles. He does not look like the England of yesteryear. That's all I can say thus far. Terrorist suspect of mowed down pedestrians drove around the 29-year-old British national. British national. See, everything is couched because you don't want to offend Mark Zuckerberg or any of the Google boys, because if you do, you'll be banned, and then you can't do anything. And so he crashed into people, mowed down cyclists and pedestrians. The 29-year-old British driver was born abroad. That's another code word, born abroad. Born abroad, has been arrested on suspicion of terror offenses. Why always after the fact did they discover where he lived? They must have known him after he crushed people in a car. Oh, he was on a watch list, but because of the laws, they couldn't do anything until he blah, blah, blah. Man in his 20s. A man in his 20s. Man. Now, if he was a member of a right-wing group, you'd hear a right-wing man in his 20s. Now we only hear a man in his 20s. Police surround the vehicle. Imagine if it was someone on the right wing who did this, what they'd be saying today. Theresa May. So it's a very crazy story, very crazy times, and we're all living as castrated human beings. Our psyche has been castrated by the liberal media. Now, those are powerful words when you think about it. If they're castrating people by turning them off Facebook, Google, whatever, YouTube, that's a form of castration, isn't it? Or execution. Execution, castration, take someone off the airwaves, execution, castration, is it not? That's going on in our time today. They just did it to Alex Jones last week. People were upset. And what happened? More people than ever are listening to him, going on to Infowars.com. Well, what can I tell you? That's the world we're living in. Driver mows down pedestrians in UK Parliament terror attack. But because he's not a member of the right wing, you don't know any of his identity. Then we read 300-plus predator priests named in Pennsylvania grand jury report. That's a big story. So I've asked you about it. If you were abused, by whom, what effect it's had upon you all the way through the years. Then I was going to talk about the early 747s. I remember those days. I'm going to jump ahead to that before the priest thing, but I was reading the airline magazine that I get once a month. This one is Aviation History. And it was all about the history of the 747. And they showed, for those of you who never flew in one, the first 747s were known as the 100. And they had a spiral staircase that went from the main deck up to a bar in the upper deck. I swear to God. There was actually a lounge up there. And I don't know how I got into the first class. I don't know, because I was poor. I was a graduate student, a researcher. I don't really know how. Maybe I talked my way in. Someone invited me in. I loved climbing that spiral staircase in the 747 and drinking at the bar for a couple hours. And if you're going to believe me, you got to believe what I'm telling you. I don't know whether this was a flight from Nandi in Fiji to Honolulu or where it was. I used to travel a lot in those days in the South Pacific. It was a 1970 100 series. Then, of course, there was the 1971 200 series, the 1980 300 series, the 1989 400 series, the 2012 747-8 Intercontinental. Most pilots will tell you it's still the best airplane in the sky, the best to fly, the best to land. But we won't talk about that machine. We'll talk about the geniuses who invented this plane and developed the plane, rather, taking it from 4 years from a piece of paper to a regular airplane. Could not be done today for a number of reasons, which I don't have to spell out for you. But I do remember climbing up into that bar and drinking with people I never met. What a fun time that was. And the best time was when the pilot came and had a drink with us. I know you're saying you're making it up. Okay, I'm making it up. Not. It was after about 4.5 or 5 hours of a very long flight, I think, from Nandi, that a pilot came back and had a drink with us in those days and chatted. We talked about flying, airplanes. I think he even had a cigarette with us. In those days, I smoked a little bit. We smoked, we drank, we passed the time away, and that was amazing days in the airplane. But let's get back to not amazing days. Let's get back to the issue of the abuse issue. And you understand all of this is not connected. This is just topics for conversation. And as I told you many times in my storied career, the purpose of conversation is to converse, not to crush. Converse means with verse. So when you have a conversation with someone, you're not trying to beat them, cut them off. You make believe you're sitting in your living room and you're leaning back having a drink and you're conversing with a friend or a neighbor. You're not trying to beat him or beat her down to a pulp and prove that you're smart and they're dumb. I'm not dumb, smart, not like people think. I can handle things, not like people say. Fredo do this, Fredo do that. Fredo go run a Mickey Mouse nightclub somewhere. I'm smart. I'm joking. I just went into a riff for you because you know where it's coming from. Like, it's one of my favorite shticks, that great piece out of The Godfather. We all think we're Michael in The Godfather, but actually many of us are also Fredo. It's like Shakespearean in its complexity. Why do you think Shakespeare was so popular in his time and still is amongst people who are literate? Because of all the characters from the king to the fool. Because we all are a king and a fool. We all are a queen and a fool. We're not just one thing or the other. That's the beauty of the human mind and the human being. And it depends upon, what your situation is as to whether you're the king or the fool. All right, KVOR, that's up in the mountains of Colorado and Colorado Springs. Lisa on line 4, tell us your sad abuse story, please.
Well, when I was 6, we lived in Taos, New Mexico, and my mother was a painter, and she wanted to paint and didn't have time for her daughter, so she put me in the care of a Navajo medicine man named Augustine. And over a summer, I was consistently abused by him under the guise of Navajo teachings. And I was 6 years old. I didn't know,
Well, before we go on with your story, I have to say in advance, I don't think you can impugn an entire tribe because of the actions of one deviant.
I'm not at all.
So you're just saying this man happened to be a member of that tribe and he used his tribal affiliation to abuse you, but you're not saying all Navajos do this, I hope.
No.
Okay. Well, I want to be clear about it because people can easily misinterpret what you just said. So you told your mother, what did she do?
Well, she was heavily into Hinduism at that point, and
She was she was a traveler to the Near East?
Yes. She said, well, it's your karma.
Oh, my God. What was your mother like? She went to one of those ashrams and sat there with her legs crossed and left you alone with the Navajo guy? Or?
Well, she went to ashrams, but not when I was with her. But she ended up just saying, it's your karma. Everything that happens is karma. And
yeah, that's nice, right?
Can't do anything.
So you're the daughter of a hippie mother, and you were abused when you were a little kid, and she never helped you in plain English. Did your mother ever cop to it later on in life and say, I'm sorry, I let this happen?
No, she said, it's too bad you feel that way, being angry.
Ooh.
Yeah, pretty narcissistic. But
wow.
You said...
So she wanted nothing to do with what happened to you. She didn't even deny that it happened. She just said it's karma, that's all.
That's right. But the way out of it, for me, was beginning to volunteer at a horse rescue, and I've been doing that now for 30 years.
That's beautiful.
I noticed that everybody who came to this particular horse rescue, whether male or female, anyone who had some kind of deep psychic wounds would be around those horses and just weep. They couldn't help it. They would just start.
Wow. Whoa. This is something that's interesting to a city boy like myself. What is it about horses that bring out that feeling?
Well, I don't know other than to say they have the greatest capacity for healing. They have the greatest capacity for kind of absorbing and unlocking everything that has ever made you hurt.
What is it, the big eyes or what?
Everything, the big energy, the big body, you gain the trust of an animal, a huge animal, and it opens your heart. I think you can approach horses like many people do with, I will use them and they will perform for me, and it's all ego. But for me, it's all heart. And I now have the blessing of a small farm, and I take in horses that are going to go to killers.
Well, we can get into another subject here, which is a heartbreaker for me. I tried the best, but I lost. I try to reason with people in the administration to not let the wild horses be shipped to Canada, be turned into dog food. I tried to save the wild horses and burros of the West. They laughed at me, basically. They wanted nothing to do with it. So there's nothing I could, there's only so much one man can do. And I know about the brutality towards animals in the world, as you well know. I mean, you listen to the show, I've intervened many times and given a lot of money to the elephant rescue, the gorilla rescue, and dogs and whatnot. I wrote Teddy and Me. I mean, the thing is, I'm a very feeling person for the helpless animals and creatures on the earth in that regard, because they are helpless at the end of the day. They may be 10 times bigger than us, but we're so smart, this aberrant species called humans, that we seem to destroy everything around us, don't we?
And until Zinke's out of there, I don't think the Western horses have much of a chance, although there are some organizations that are getting very loud, and we're having some...
No, I'm sorry. I've made my feelings pretty clear, and they don't like me for it. I've expressed my feelings about the gentleman named Mr. Zinke. I think he's the wrong man for the Interior Department, and I think that he is just blind to what most Americans think about animals, frankly, especially at this late stage of evolution, Lisa, I thank you so much for calling the Savage Nation. I'll be right back.
Savage.
I got to give you an important message, because I got to tell you, home security is the most important thing for all of us, right? We want to go home and be safe. Well, I can't stress enough how bad the home security industry happens to be right now. It's broken. The legacy companies are stuck in the 80s. They still lock you into 3-year contracts, still hit you with hidden fees, bad technology. They do all the stuff your neighbors complain about. But Simply Safe Home Security is different. That's why I picked them to be on this show. This is home security that finally gets it right. Simply Safe started 10 years ago with a mission to fix the industry. They cut out contracts. They cut out middlemen. They got rid of pushy sales guys. They made it easy to set up your system with no hard wiring or tools. With Simply Safe, you get professionally monitored 24/7 protection for just $15 a month. That's your home protected by police dispatch, fire dispatch. Everyone loves this system. They love how it works, how easy it is to use. You know that Simply Safe now protects over 2 million people. They've won Editor's Choice Awards from CNET, PC Mag, and Wirecutter. I want you to go do the following. I want you to go to simplysafesavage.com to order your Simply Safe system. You're going to get a 60-day risk-free trial. Once again, that's simplysafesavage.com to protect your home and family today. Write it down and call it. Actually, log on to simplysafesavage.com. We are talking about, well, we're talking about the big news story about the abuse scandal that just hit the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania. 300 predator priests named in grand jury sex abuse report. They were raping little boys and girls. I mean, it's enough to make you crazy. More than 1,000 little children named. 1,000 children's lives ruined. Some of you may be them. Listening to this show, you buried it. You said, oh, what the heck can I do about it? Right? They were raping little boys and girls. The children who are abused tend to bury it, by the way. And they think that they're bad for having engaged in it. Do you understand that? And they don't want to embarrass the adult who abuses them. Do you know any of that? What it does to that child? They're screwed up for the rest of their life. So, I'm all for exposure of this stuff. Because, it's always someone else's child. It happens somewhere else. Well, it happened everywhere, apparently. 301 priests, clergy, and lay teachers with credible allegations, 99 in the Diocese of Pittsburgh alone. One boy was forced to stand on a bed in a rectory, stripped naked, and pose as Christ on a cross for the priests. They took photos of their victim, adding them to a collection of child pornography, which they produced and shared on church grounds. If this is true, this is far worse than anything I've ever seen in my life. I'll go on for what the lawyer said. To make it easier to target their victims, the priests gave their favorite boys gifts, gold crosses to wear as necklaces. The crosses were markings of which boys have been groomed for abuse. I don't know. I got a migraine headache looking at this. I feel sick looking at this. I'm getting sick. How can anyone do this? How could you rape a little boy and a girl while wearing a religious costume? How? I don't know, my friends. They name the priests now. The report includes some priests who stood trial and were convicted of sexual assault. In the Diocese of Pittsburgh, they include Father Robert Wolk of St. Thomas More, Bethel Park. I don't want to even read the names. I don't want to read them right now. I have a sickness in my stomach reading this. So this is a news story. It's a terrible story. And it goes to the heart of human relations and human feelings and human emotions. Many of you are listening, and you're hardened people now, and you think it's nothing. This came out in the grand jury today. And the grand jury recommended changing Pennsylvania law to eliminate the criminal statute of limitations for sexually abusing children. Big story. Back in a minute.
Savage. Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
It is the Savage Nation. And we are talking about a very, very sad topic. Sad topic. We could do ha-ha today and ho-ho. But a new sex abuse report out of Pennsylvania. 300 predator priests named in a grand jury sex abuse report. They were raping little boys and girls, and they want the statute of limitations overturned so that people who were abused and ruined as little boys and girls so many years ago can have their day in court. It's that simple. Big story, very important, and it brings to mind the bigger question of God. What do you do if you don't believe in God? How do you find purpose? And I've told you that some of us, whether we believe in God or not, have made other things our motivation to get up out of bed every morning, and that is usually excellence. That would be the pilot who flies in, pilot and all, at all, for example. The athlete, the poet, write the best poem, fly the best flight, run the best race, do the best radio show. Right? That's the way it is. Some drive themselves. Some don't even know what it is to drive themselves. I don't know why I'm going to do this for you, but I do know why I'm doing it for you. I have sound bites of the day like we all get in radio. So here is Pelosi, who has to be the lowest class of humanity. Now, remember now who she is. She's one of the wealthiest white women in the world. I want you to listen to this for 1 minute and then ask yourself what society we would be living in if we had people of thought, people of education, people of imagination running things instead of the lowest level of humanity. Listen to Pelosi in clip 2.
The president, with all of his statements, he's the master of the dog whistle. Everything that he has done, whether it's taking babies out of the arms of their moms, whether it's issues that relate to health care in our country, access to services and the rest, it's his whole thing is make America white again. That's his thing.
This is a white woman, one of the wealthiest in the world, who has greatly profited during her time in office, who is using racism of the lowest kind. And it seems this is what passes for politicians today. Where are the philosopher politicians of today? Where are the men and women of thought in politics today? Where do they exist? Do they exist at all? Not all of us have gone to sleep mentally. So, look, I'm going to do what I do in my own way, and I hope that it resonates with you. It has for a quarter of a century. I'm not going to change horses in midstream all of a sudden now and start talking Democrat, Republican like it means something to me. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. The glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run, and nearer he's to setting. That age is best which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer, but being spent, the worse and worst times still succeed the former. Then be not coy, but use your time, and while ye may go marry, for having lost but once your prime, you may forever tarry. That was written by Robert Herrick, who lived between 1591 and 1674. To the best of my knowledge, I do not know of anyone on Twitter or Facebook who is worth $500 million who has written a better song than this. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, known as To the Virgins to Make Much of Time. Now, of course, we in college, in my days at Queens College in New York, we were very clever. We found this one poem. We didn't really understand poetry. Most of us had come from lower middle-class backgrounds, which didn't have much literature in the background. And when we were exposed to poetry, some of us mocked it and laughed at it, but some of us actually read the stuff and loved it. I was one of those. I loved A.E. Housman, for example, the scholar poet. But I loved this poem, but I didn't use it for highfalutin reasons. I used it to date girls and read them this poem. It was that simple. That's what boys do. I guess today, if you read that poem, you could be arrested for something. Yeah, I guess today, if a boy's found with this, look at this, To the Virgins to Make Much of Time. Oh, arrest him. Look at that. He's carrying around a poem, Your Honor. Gather ye rosebuds while you may. He's another Harvey Weinstein. Arrest that lad. Arrest that lad. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Are you trying to seduce that young girl and get married and have a family? How disgusting in this world. I don't know, man. Watching the wheels turn. Turn. Watching the wheels of insanity get worse. To the point where your mind is grinded down into dust by the likes of a Nancy Pelosi. I don't care that she's a liberal Democrat, which she really isn't. She's a phony billionaire who uses liberal democracy to advance her self-interest. That's clear as a bell. Okay, that's clear as a bell to anyone with an IQ over 95. But for her to resort to racism in every statement she makes and attack the president as a racist is sickening, actually. You talk about censure in Congress. This woman should be censured for what she just said. The whole thing is make America white again. You know, that makes me sick. You know, that makes me ill as the man who wrote Trump's War and outlined so many of President Trump's good policies in 4 of my previous books, Government Zero, etc. I don't have to read you the titles. Many of you know what I'm talking about. Trickle up poverty, trickle down. You know, trust me, a lot of what I wrote was picked up by individuals who told me to my face that they put it into a simpler form and turned it into policy, which is why we have this great country we have today with a booming economy and new self-respect on the world stage, incidentally. Make it real simple for you. booming economy, and new self-respect on the world stage because of the policies of the Trump administration. You don't have to agree with them for your own interests, whatever they may be. But to resort to racism in every comment about Donald Trump is actually not sickening. It's a form of degeneracy. And that's why we go the higher road today. Poetry, maybe a little philosophy, maybe a little psychology. But we're certainly not going to roll in the mud of our times. So let's get to the callers right now. God, it's flying along here on the show, isn't it? I asked you, if you don't believe in God, how do you get through a day? What do you do if you really don't? So many people today don't believe in anything except themselves. And that's the way life has been for so many people for so long. They don't believe in anything. So some of us, some of you are atheists, but somehow you get through a day. And so you use something else as your purpose for existence, such as doing things so great that you excel at it. That becomes your God, right? Rightly or wrongly, that's what a lot of people do. They want to excel in their field. They want to be the best at what they do. That becomes a reason to exist, to get up in the morning. Sometimes it's out of malice. I think of someone from Hollywood who I've heard about, one of the worst human beings on the planet, a man in his 8th decade of life who lives only for sex. And to have sex only with people who don't even want it with him, but to coerce them with money. Think of that. 8th decade of life, has learned nothing except to seek to humiliate people in sex. Now think about that. A multi-billionaire, loved by those in Hollywood, revered by those in Hollywood, looked up to those in Hollywood. They worship this human being. They all want to be around him. And he lives to destroy people's self-respect by buying sex from them against their will. Now think about that. These are the people who run Hollywood. Make no mistake about it. They're at the top of the entertainment pyramid. They are the eye on top of the pyramid. They create the beacon that the whole world has to look at. Now think about that. Think about that. Where do we turn in a world like this? Well, what motivates a man like that is the question. What can a man like that do in the morning to get out of bed, get up in the morning, wash his face, put clothing on? What motivates him to get up every day? It's certainly not God. He wouldn't do those things if he believed in God, would he? No, so it's not God. It's pure, unadulterated physical pleasure and the mental and psychological abuse of another individual. That motivates him. That's what makes him get up in the morning. Think about this. The things that motivate human beings. They're all over the map. Don't assume everyone is like you. Don't think everyone believes like you do. So the human condition is quite vast in its dramas. And so I ask you again about these things. And I haven't gotten yet to the Boeing 747, which is so different than what we're talking about because of the article I was reading about the evolution of jumbo and how the 747 revolutionized air travel. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, right? WABC, Chris, line 1, what's your topic, please?
Hello, Dr. Savage. I love your show. Thank you for having me on. So I'll get right to it. I believe in the philosophy of objectivism. It was developed by Ayn Rand.
Of course, I'm aware of it. So how does that work in your daily life?
In my daily life, I don't have faith in anything. I take up everything within reason and fact to my own reality on how I perceive it. Pretty much the basis of the philosophy is I will not be forced or coerced to live for another, and I will not force or coerce another to live for myself. So a lot of...
Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions how an objectivist does relate to the following. You're in a room, and you see a butterfly fly in, and it's trapped in your house. Do you open the door to let the butterfly out, or you don't care about it?
I would let the butterfly out.
Why would you let the butterfly out? Isn't that objectively nature just playing with the wind?
No, to me, it would be my rational thought of what would be the right thing to do. It would be my choice.
Okay, the right thing to do.
The right thing to do.
So likewise with the bum in the street, the filthy bum with lice on him in the streets of New York. I assume you're calling from New York. Do you walk by with contempt saying, I don't care about him, or do you care about that bum?
About that bum, if I had some certain value to him, if if I felt like going out of my way to help them, then sure, I'll help them. If I don't want to help them, no one's going to force me to.
Well, unfortunately, our society does force you to help the bum.
Yes.
When I walk through San Francisco, and I see armies of bums, young, old, sitting around smoking marijuana all day long in the nice sun, whether they're on roller skates or skateboards rather, and they don't work, and I know I'm supporting them, I am furious. Do you know that? I'm enraged by it. And I say, what a sick society that these bums get to do nothing all day. Well, I kill myself and pay state taxes so these filthy degenerates can sit around all day and do nothing but defecate in the street and shoot up drugs and leave needles around that people can stick themselves with. What kind of sane society would permit this? Is what I think to myself. That's what I actually think to myself. Does that make me crazy?
No, we live in a society filled with altruism and forced self-sacrifice. We're forced to contribute towards others for no return contribution. And I find that philosophically wrong and morally wrong.
Well, okay, so that goes to liberalism as a mental disorder, doesn't it? I mean, my statement and my book title of 06, Liberalism as a Mental Disorder, describes what you just stated.
Yes. I don't believe in altruism. I believe in that being raised to be altruistic is a plague to our society. We aren't born to serve. We aren't our brother's keepers. We're not born to serve each other. We're born to serve ourselves in our own self-interest. And in doing so, it betters our lives and the lives of those around us, as long as we do it rationally and without forcing our will upon others. That's my philosophy.
Well, so I understand you've read all of Ayn Rand's great works, and you're not alone in your objectivism. But you yourself don't believe in a higher power, I assume.
No, I can't believe in something based off of faith. I need reason and fact. That's my own views. I'm 26 years old. Maybe I'll, in the future, see some kind of evidence, some kind of fact that could, bring me to that belief. But
wait, sorry, how old are you?
My reality.
Sorry, Chris, how old are you?
26.
Oh, you're a youngster. You don't have children, right?
I have one son.
Did you see that son being born?
Yes.
I mean, were you in the delivery room when your son was born?
Yes.
Okay, that didn't change your view of the world, because it did for me. My whole world changed as a human being when I saw my child born. So this brings out different instincts in a human being, but that's a separate story. It does tie into the sexual abuse scandal going on right now with the predator priest accused of sexually abusing more than 1,000 children. I'm sure you feel very strongly about that story.
Yes. I was abused as a child, not by any ministry or any religious figure. I was physically abused, not sexually abused, and that's kind of what made me develop my philosophical beliefs.
All right, well, I'm going to do something for you that I haven't done yet. I'm going to start today. I guess today will be the kickoff. We're going to start collecting the names and send you copies of everyone who gets on the show that I can remember to do it for, unless they ask for something else. You're going to get the first copies, amongst the first copies of my new book coming out in early November, because I can see what's coming here. My book does not have anything about sex abuse. There is no N-word in it. There's no expose of what Donald Trump didn't say or did say. And so it will be rightly ignored by the media, because they're only interested in the most salacious filth that could be published by a human being. I will send you one of the first copies off the press of Stop Mass Hysteria, America's Insanity from the Salem Witch Trials to the Trump Witch Hunt, from the Red Scare to Russian Collusion, the minute it's off the presses. Would you like that? He said nothing. Jim, did you drop him already? Because I didn't even hear yes. All right, he's not there. Okay, he can't get the book. He doesn't get the book. All right, I was going to send him the first copy of Stop Mass Hysteria, the collector's edition. Anyone else who gets on the air today and maybe going forward will be put on the list. You'll get the books before they're even in the bookstores. I know how that works. I'll be right back. Be here or be nowhere.
Savage.
Welcome back to the Savage Nation. We're talking about the monster story about priest abuse. Oh, God, that's a big story. And we're talking in a few minutes with some people about the Boeing 747, the jumbo that changed the world as we know it, and the geniuses who built that plane from paper to the airplane that it was in only 4 years. Compare that to the minuscule minds of today.
Savage.
I see the lean, hard bodies in Afghanistan fighting the Taliban. I see the lean, hard bodies in the 101st Airborne over Germany. I see the lean, hard men in Vietnam. And I look around my society today, and I see mountains of wasted lives who've been brainwashed into this concept of, quote, social change, which is nothing but naked communism. All of these millions of young idiots who could be advancing humanity with simple inventions and advancements, whether they be in medicine or in engineering or in science or a new paperclip. Instead, they're wasting their everyday thinking about how to get even with people they never even met who look like themselves. Think about this. Think about this, which is why I'm partly doing the story on aviation today. How you can take the concept of an airplane that's revolutionary and go from a paper drawing to an airplane like the 747 in only 4 years, and how each step along the way was a piece of creative genius, one step after the other, whether it was be a design of an engine change or a wing change or this change or that change. Their minds weren't on social change. And think of what it did in liberating humanity, in transporting people around the globe. Now think of the millions of morons who are being brainwashed, maybe hopelessly for the rest of their lives, into being non-productive citizens working day and night to undermine society and destroy it. So this is what I see. And I wonder what you see. That's why we're talking about these topics today, you know. I'm not going to talk about this one said that and that one said this and the president tweeted this. I mean, the tweeting has got to stop. I am sorry. As supportive as I am of President Trump, I don't know how he's getting sucked into this rabbit hole of tweeting with the lowest form of humanity. Can he stop it? You know, he got mad at me, I think, when he said, you're being tough on me, I think. This is not being tough on him. Can't somebody say to him that he would be more dignified not to respond to some lowlife who's trying to peddle a book and the filth in the media who is buying into it without any verification whatsoever? You know, I'm an author, and a fairly prominent one at that. And all of my books have been on the New York Times list. So here I have a book coming out in November called Stop Mass Hysteria, which is a departure for me because it will be not just a polemic about these times, but also has a great deal of history going back to the time of Columbus, showing you how mass hysterical movements of mass hysteria have come and gone in America and how they tie into today's mass hysteria. It's actually a brilliant piece of history in a popular format. I know many of you are going to enjoy the book. But I want you to think about this. How can I compete in the marketplace where the lowest forms of humanity are writing invented books about something Trump didn't even say or did say or didn't say, and immediately the vermin in the media jump, ooh, let's get her on. We got to get her on the show to say the N-word. Did he really say the N-word? Cross your legs back and forth twice, honey. Did he really say the N-word? When did he actually say it? Did you say it? Did he say it? Did he say it? Did he say it? Now think about this. Now think about the world that we live in and how the lowest forms of humanity are running the media and what they choose to pollute the mass mind with, not elevate it with, not lift us up, but push us down lower and lower and lower into the gutter. Publishers running to throw money at the lowest forms of humanity who could come up with one slander after another against the president. And then you've got the media. Look who they want on their shows. The lower the form of humanity, the higher they go in the media. Think about that one. Well, anyway, those are some of the random thoughts that we're talking about, and we'll take some calls here. Let's go to George on KSFO on the story of Jumbo. George, tell us your story about Jumbo.
Hello, Michael. Just quickly, a Bronx boy here, and graduate of Aviation High School in Queens. So,
no, this is great. There was an Aviation High School in Queens, and what did you do what did you get a degree, like a high school degree in what?
I got an aircraft mechanics license.
Wow.
And then I went on to Purdue, did professional pilot training program, and I was flying on the side, privately learning how to fly. So the combination of everything in 1965 got me hired with a major carrier.
As a pilot or a mechanic?
As a pilot.
So you flew the 747?
Which is, they're unknown today, but I was in the third seat as a flight engineer for a very short time because the airlines were growing like a mushroom at that point. And I was at 21 years old and was fortunate enough to be in some of the first classes of training for the 747 when it made its debut in the early 70s.
Well, I was reading about how the 747 lands, and it's known as one of the softest landing planes ever developed. Is that true?
Well, it is. There's a lot of rubber underneath you. Believe me, I think there were 18 main wheel tires.
No, but it wasn't just that. It was how the wings were designed, and almost by chance, the way it landed was softer because of the turbulence that was not created by the wing design.
Well, you're right, Michael. There's things that I'm probably not relating in total because I have a lot to say, but it was a wonderful airplane to fly, and
so it was a pilot-friendly plane.
I'm sorry.
It was a pilot-friendly plane.
Oh, it certainly was, and just some interesting facts that I remember is that the 747 could carry as much fuel as a fully loaded 707 weighed.
In other words, in fuel weight, it was equal to the weight of a 707, which it replaced.
Fully loaded.
I was reading the 1970 era, 747-100 carried 366 passengers. They cost $24 million each at the time, and they had a range of 5,300 miles. And then we go all the way up to 2012 with the 747-8 Intercontinental, carries 467 passengers, costs $300 million apiece, and has a range of 8,000 miles.
Michael, those figures are in my mind. I remember the 747. The round figure was $25 million when I stepped into it, and I used to kid people that didn't include the fancy hubcaps.
Now, let me ask you: do you remember the early days of the 747 with the circular staircase to the upper deck, which was a bar?
I certainly do. We used that was the access to the cockpit.
Oh, right. The pilots and crew had to go up the same steps through the bar to get to the cockpit, right?
Yeah, and the lounge in that particular 100 series I was flying was probably smaller than what you remember, but they did have a piano bar in the back.
I don't remember a piano bar. Come on.
And yes, and I remember Frank Sinatra made that feature famous when he sat back there on the flight and entertained the passengers.
Well, I'm not making it up when I tell a story flying from Nandi in Fiji to Honolulu, I believe, on those long-haul 6-hour flights, which I did many times after collecting plants or whatever, and I really let go smoking cigarettes and drinking in that bar. I'm not making it up, but a pilot once came back there and started drinking with us. I don't know whether he was off duty or not. I don't want to even tell you what flight it was and have him disinterred from the grave and arrested. But
Michael, it might have been a deadheading, what we call a deadheading.
I hope so, man. I hope he was deadheading because I didn't want to wind up dead.
Well, to me, it was the thrill of a lifetime. I mean, you sat up there. I often thought of like you were flying a condominium. You were so high up.
But what's interesting is here you're a kid who went to aviation high school and wound up all the way up to the level of flying one of those things.
Yes.
Well, now in aviation high school, what did you study? Airplane mechanics, you said?
It was basically yes. That was it was the tech school, and we had everything that the regular academic student would in high school.
Oh, okay. So you took all the regular subjects, and then you took aviation.
Yeah, and I used to stay a couple of nights a week. I used to stay because the school offered training to people in the industry on the outside who wanted to get their mechanics license. So they held those classes at night, and I used to stay over after school got out and sit through those classes just because I was so hungry to learn.
Oh. Well, George, the interesting question here is, do these schools still exist? Is there such a thing as an aviation high school in New York, or it's a social justice school now in New York?
I'm sorry, Michael.
What, the high school no longer exists, the aviation high school, or it does?
Yes, it's still in existence. It's right there.
Oh, because I thought maybe only under de Blasio they could only have a social justice degree.
It's right there at Queensboro Plaza. It used to be in the school originally was Manhattan Aviation Trades, was in New York City in Manhattan, and then they bought a brand new school. I was there I think I was in the second or third graduating class when it moved to Queens.
Well, the interesting part of this story for me is the engineering that was created by the geniuses who step by step changed the world of flying and opened up the world of flying for millions of people around the world, and how the little changes had such a huge effect upon aviation to begin with. And, and each step of the way was the result of creativity and genius on the part of the engineers and designers.
Oh, for sure. It was a miracle.
I don't know if people know what went on, but the first engines didn't work. And the first engines were plagued with reliability issues and fell short of the promised 40,000-pound thrust. And for the 747's first flight on February 9th, 1969, Boeing went through 30 different engines before they found out 4 of them that were deemed fit to fly that airplane. Now, what I'm saying is this took genius on the parts of the engineers to keep changing it, because the first production models didn't even work. They called the first Boeing that rolled out, the 47, a fleet of the largest gliders in the world because so many were parked awaiting engines. And altogether, listen to this, guys, 87 different engines were used in flight testing, and only 60 of them were destroyed. And there were so many changes made to the JT9 specs that some test airplanes flew with several different engines.
I will tell you this, Michael, that during the whole time that I flew, and again, this was as first officer in the cockpit on the 747, we never had one failure or shutdown, engine shutdown failure.
January 1970, the first flight of a Pan Am 747 took place when Clipper Constitution departed from New York's Kennedy for London with 324 passengers. And after a 7-hour delay and an airplane switch because of engine problems, you listening to this? The plane took off. It was 2 hours later departing, and we had an unplanned 4-hour stopover in Seattle for engine maintenance on another flight that was taken. So, look, I remember flying on those things from Fiji to Honolulu, from Fiji to San Francisco, and one of my proudest and most enjoyable flights was in the 80s. What year was this? 85. It was the latest 747. When I took my then young son to Japan on the first flights from New York to Narita.
Wow.
It was the introductory flights, and I got on it as a writer, believe it or not, for a travel magazine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Now, here's a funny story, a little side note. So I had my 13-year-old son with me, growing boy, and he said, sure, Dad, I'd love to go with you. It was a great thrill for me to be able to take him. Here I was, a guy writing a magazine article. So we get in the first-class compartment, courtesy of the airline. There were only 2 other passengers. There were 2 elderly Asian people. The minute they got on, they put masks on and went to sleep. On the other hand, we didn't go right to sleep. We enjoyed eating, I think, for the next 10 hours, especially the young growing boy. So when the stewardess or a flight attendant came down the aisle with a big cart filled with fresh roast beef, well, we both had a helping. She came back and she said, would you like another? I said no. My son said, sure, I'll have another. Then she comes down for another. Would you like another? Yeah, another. He took 4 helpings till she actually got a little angry, like, how many is he eating? How could this kid eat so much? So those were the days, my friend, and we thought they would never end.
A lot of fond memories. I'm
going to send you a copy of Stop Mass Hysteria. Stay on the line. Jim will take your name and address. I'll be right back.
Savage.
All right, let's talk about something that can affect every one of us, which is cars breaking down. Okay, you take your car in for an oil change. Mechanic says, uh-oh, something wrong. You get a repair bill. You could be on the road, vacation. What are you going to do? Well, if you have extended vehicle protection from CarShield, you don't have to worry about those unexpected surprises. Look, if your car breaks down after the manufacturer's warranty expires, you could be out of pocket thousands of dollars to get it fixed. What does an engine cost? Even a sensor today could be over $1,000. But CarShield makes the process of fixing your car for a covered repair very, very easy. Favorite mechanic or dealership can do it. They also give you 24/7 roadside assistance, a rental car while yours is being fixed for free. So pay attention. If your car has 5,000, 150,000 miles, it doesn't mean you have to pay high repair bills. CarShield administrators have already paid out close to $2 billion in claims. They're ready to help you. So save yourself thousands in future car repairs. Get covered by the ultimate and extended vehicle protection. Just go to 800-CAR-6100, 800-CAR-6100. But you must mention code SAVAGE to save 10%. That's carshield.com, code SAVAGE, 10% off. That's carshield.com, code SAVAGE. Or call 800-CAR-6100. Again, code SAVAGE. A deductible may apply. Line 8. Line 8, my friend on WABC. Mike, what's on your mind? Go ahead, Mike. You're on the radio. What's on your mind? Mike! Okay, that's a dud. That's called a dud in radio. You call it, you build up, they listen, and boom, nothing happens. Rob on WABC, line 5. What's your story?
All right, Michael, how you doing? Okay, I'm a Bronx boy. I went to 12 years of Catholic school.
You're a Bronx boy like Ocasio-Cortez, huh?
No. I grew up in the Bronx.
You actually didn't grow up in Westchester. Okay, I got it.
No, I'm actually in Westchester now, but...
So you made it out of the Bronx to Westchester. So what happened as a kid?
Okay, as a kid, basically, even before we get into the Catholic Church thing, I was with a friend. We were both going to the same Catholic school. We went over. He says, hey, there's a guy who'll buy us ice cream. He'll take us to the movies or whatever. So we went to his house.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. Was he a priest? Was he a priest, the abuser?
No, he wasn't. He was actually a politician.
Great. That's even worse. Okay.
Michael Savage, a host like no other. Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. The Westwood One Podcast Network presents The Savage Nation. It's savage, uncut, unfiltered, and raw. Home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
We keep hearing a term bandied about by conservatives, which is they're selling freedom. Freedom is their stock and trade. That somehow they know what freedom is. No one else ever heard of the word. It was not invented before they came along. No one ever heard of freedom. No one knows what freedom is. They got the book on freedom. No one else knows what freedom is. So I'm going to ask you, what is freedom? Because if we are a free nation, as we think we are, if we are the freest nation on earth, then why are we enslaved by drugs, pornography, and other addictions? If we're so free, then why are there so many drug addicts and alcohol addicts? If we're so free, why are we so addicted to pornography? And then I keep hearing that if you're really free, you're anti-government. Really? Is that true? So you want anarchy now? Who do you want running the streets? The criminal gangs? Well, then you say, no, I don't mean free of all government. We need the police. Why, we love the men in blue. Why, we support them. Do you? What else do you support in government? Do you support red lights, yellow lights, and green lights on the highway and stop signs? Why, yes, we support those things. Oh, so you support that. Well, do you support anything else in the government? Well, yes, but we believe in limited government. We're anti-big government. We are the freedom-loving Americans, the patriots. We're the great Americans, and the others are all bad. Okay, so what do you mean you don't believe in government? Certainly you have to have limited government, don't you? Well, if you have a limited government, so you agree that there needs to be some government. So if you agree there has to be some government, we have to decide as the governed what we want governed and what we want controlled. That's the real question, Plato, isn't it? Yeah, so therefore, Glaucon, what do we do next? Well, Glaucon says what we have to do next is arrest all the pornographers and ban all pornography and seize all the assets of all the pornographers that they have accrued over the last 30 years, even if they've hidden the money with their children, grandchildren, grandmothers, or in the Cayman Islands. Seize all of their money, use all of the money for pornography rehabilitation, and put the rest of them in prison for the rest of their lives. I know you're applauding inside your hearts. Now we'll go down the next step. What do you do about the drug addiction problem? Well, you could spend money on treatment from today until tomorrow. It's not going to have much of an effect. Everybody knows the recidivism rate on drug treatment is very, very high. Okay, and there's a reason for it.
The real answer is not treating drug addiction. The real answer is stopping the flood of drugs into America. Many years ago, I went to Malaysia, and I was shocked when I was driving in from the airport at Kuala Lumpur to see a gigantic billboard the size of an apartment building that said, using drugs in Malaysia is punishable by death. It was very clear that there was a real campaign to stop the use of drugs in Malaysia, and they punished drug dealers by killing them, and there was a reason for it, because they were near the Golden Triangle where drugs are produced. And they knew that the entire nation would be addicted to drugs unless they cracked down on the drug dealers. I don't hear anyone talking about any of these things, by the way. So these are some of the questions that I'm thinking about. I will give you the answer in a moment of which countries consume the largest amount of illegal drugs. You probably will be shocked by the answer because it is not the United States of America. And I will also explain to you not only which countries consume the highest amount of illegal drugs, the largest quantity of illegal drugs, but the drugs they are consuming. You'll be shocked when you hear the answer. Trust me, it's worth waiting for. I think the government's got to get involved in the drug epidemic, which Trump says he's doing. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. More treatment? Big deal. Half the treatment facilities are owned by drug cartels. So far as I can tell, they get you coming and going. Well, look into the board of directors of drug treatment facilities. Why don't you see if there's any interlocking corporate directorships between the treatment facility giants and the manufacturers of hard drugs. See if they're not sitting on pharmaceutical boards and on treatment boards. And then you'll understand why nothing will really happen. It could even be worse than that for all I know. If I were writing the script, it would be much worse than that. But I'm not a script writer, I'm only a talk show host. I have a limited knowledge of everything. My limited knowledge, one man of 7 billion has a very limited knowledge of the world. But with the limited knowledge that I have, I express it. It's that, it's very interesting. I actually thought of that for the first time because if you're in the media, you get megalomaniac. You become a megalomaniac and you think that you know everything and you're smarter than everybody. And then when the microphone goes off or the Klieg lights go off and you got to get up in the morning and there you are again, the same exact worm that God made. The same thing made from that foul drop. That same thing you are. And you got to get yourself up and wash your face and have your coffee or your chai or whatever you make to make yourself better than the next man. Not coffee, of course, if you're superior and you're a vegan. You wouldn't have something as evil as coffee. You have something like chai, some special drink only for you, made only for you, at the 7,000-foot range, picked by dwarfs of a certain spiritual class. God forbid someone should touch the leaf that you're drinking who is impure. And then at night, after your workday is over, all you purity freaks, you go to a nightclub till 4 o'clock in the morning and fill yourself with garbage. The next day, of course, you're a vegan again, drinking chai, lecturing everybody on white privilege and racism. And the cycle continues. There's another addiction in this country, which is an addiction to lies. The lie of white privilege. What a convenient way to hate white people. What a convenient, brilliant way to attack an entire race through racism and call yourself purer and holier than thou. But getting back to the issue of the top 8 countries consuming illegal drugs, the number one nation that uses drugs is, roll of the drums in your head, Iran. That's right. Holier than thou Iran. Strict Muslim, strictly Muslim Iran. Holier than everybody with the mullahs running everything. Those pure mullahs, you know how good they are, don't you? Suffers one of the highest opiate drug addiction rates in the world. 14.32% per capita use heroin. Even though it's an oppressive religious government, even though Islam is allegedly against drug use, isn't it odd that Iran is at the top of the list? Is it the top of the list? And that the country's drug of choice are opiates? How is that possible? I thought the mullahs were so frum. I thought they were so pure. I thought the mullahs were so clean. I thought the mullahs were so great as role models. Highest, top of the list of countries consuming illegal drugs. 14.32% use heroin. Why? How is that even possible? Why? because Iran's location in the Persian Gulf is an important transshipment point for Southeast Asian heroin on its way to European markets. Just remember the French connection. But heroin is not the only problem in Iran. Drugs are also being brought in by the trainload from Afghanistan, mainly opium. Oh, you didn't know opium was grown in Afghanistan? Did you know that's why all the American boys were dying there? To keep the old trail open? Make sure come on, that's an absurd conspiracy theory. I know that. All these boys are not sent there. They're sent there for freedom. The boys are sent there to be butchered for freedom. What if it turns out we're just a Hessian force that's being sent in to make sure the drugs keep flowing? Because the odd part about that one, and I'm almost reluctant to say it because it makes me very nervous to say it, the Taliban oppose the growth of poppies. Did you know that? Oh, yeah. Yeah. We want them to have the freedom to grow poppies. How does that figure out? So Iran suffers one of the highest opiate addiction rates in the world. They also have a big problem with synthetic drugs. And by the way, this is an odd one. Even though there's a strict penalty in the Islamic Republic of Iran, they regularly enforce the death penalty for drug offenses, and yet they have one of the highest rates of drug use in the world. So I'm not so sure the death penalty would even work. What would work? Do I have an answer for you? I'm only one of 7 billion. Unlike others in the media, I am not God Almighty. I'm only a talk show host. United Kingdom is at number 2, alcohol, 13.65% capita. So they're boozers in England, a bunch of drunks. 1.6 million people in England are alcohol dependent. But listen to this. The treatment rate is very low because they don't want to be treated. They don't want to be treated. They love being drunks. It's part of their tradition. In other words, it's their tradition to be drunkards in England. They don't want that stopped. What are you, crazy? Be treated? Why, we want to go to the pub and get loaded and collapse in the street and have our skirts fall up to our navels at 6 o'clock in the morning. So the garbage man finds us in the street like a pail of garbage. That's womanhood in England. We don't want to be like the other countries. We want to be free. And coming in at number 3 of the top countries consuming illegal drugs is France. They're pillheads. You didn't know that the French are not winos anymore. They're pillheads. Since they gave up wine, they became pillheads. 13.2% of the population are addicted to pills. And that's because it's easier to procure painkillers in France than the U.S. And prescription drug prices are cheaper in France, all you socialists. That's why you love socialism. And so they're cheaper, more accessible. A bottle of painkiller meds can reach a price of $133 in the United States, while the same bottle of killing pills could cost in France about $57. And the 3 predominant painkillers consumed by the winos, the ex-winos in France, are Valium-like compounds, benzodiazepines, buprenorphine? Buprenorphine. Oh, they made a buprine molecule on morphine. Interesting. And methadone. Oh, yeah, old methadone. Methadone is more addictive than heroin, according to people I've interviewed. Treatment, yeah, real treatment. I don't know if you know the history of morphine, heroin, and methadone. I'll give it to you in a nutshell. It's very interesting to me as a former student of pharmacology. This country was addicted to the drug of morphine when it was legal, talking 1900 era. Morphine was in so many different over-the-counter products, elixirs and this and syrups and distillates and that. They even gave morphine-based products to babies who were teething. So an entire generation before World War I was addicted to morphine-related products in America. So this is really nothing new. But the addiction to morphine became so great that the scientific community was asked to come up with a synthetic derivative of morphine that would produce some pain-killing properties without being addicted. So the scientists produced 3,6-diacetyl morphine, which means they added acetyl groups to the morphine molecule, and then it was proposed to be much safer than morphine while affording similar, if not superior, pain-relieving qualities. So They released the equivalent of the 3,6-diacetylmorphine, and it was very popular because that product, 3,6-diacetylmorphine, is heroin. Heroin was produced in the laboratories as a cure for morphine addiction. Okay, so then the heroin addiction became a bigger problem than the morphine addiction. Spin the clock forward 50 years. Now we come to treatment for heroin. So the government scientists come up with methadone. Hey, how many times have you seen poor drug addicts? Oh, here's the thing, take the thing, suck the thing, drink the thing, take the pill, got to take the pill and the treatment. Now it turns out that junkies were more addicted to methadone, which was highly available on the streets because it was such a great high that methadone became a drug of choice for a lot of people addicted to a heroin. So I don't have an immediate answer to the problem. I'm giving you the top countries consuming illegal drugs, because I think it's a fascinating thing to learn that Iran is at the top of the list, even though it's a strictly Muslim nation, and that there's a death penalty for drug offenses. And then number 2 is UK with booze consumption. And number 3 are the pillheads over in France. They're no longer using wine. They're using pills. They love their Valium. Liberté, equality, fraternité, and, of course, benzodiazepine. Now we're a generation that is addicted to drugs and pornography. And the president says that we can be the generation that ends the opioid epidemic. That's a good thing, right? No, you're wrong, not according to the vermin in the media. Trump comes out as the first president to try to end the opioid epidemic, and the rats, the sewer rats in the media with suits and ties and dirty dresses, the sewer rats in the media say it's not enough. Lydia, why didn't he do more, Lydia? We've interviewed some heroin addicts who said they're glad to hear it, but the president has not gone far enough. Well, how far did Obama go in ending the opioid epidemic? Like nowhere. He didn't even lift a toe. So no matter what Mr. Trump does, these sewer rats in the media will say he didn't do enough, or he was wrong, or he did this, he did that. I could go on all day long about my hatred. It's becoming not just distaste, anger, rage. It's absolute hatred for these sewer rats in the media. They have destroyed the world, and now they're destroying the country. You may think that they are innocent and just doing it for fun, but you have no idea what damage they're doing to this country and to the world. And I will tell you right now, if you think that there's not going to be a rebound effect to the Wolf Blitzers of the world and what they are doing, Mr. Blinky with the white beard, who should have been a tie salesman in the garment district of New York instead of a newsman, he has the same mentality as a tie salesman as far as I'm concerned. One question after the other, giving them away. It's unbelievable to me. So the president says, okay, we're going to be the first generation that ends the opioid epidemic, and they attack him, even though no other president tried to do it like this. And, of course, what you start with is handcuffs and an FBI task force in all of the glass buildings in Connecticut that sell drugs. Oh, I'm not talking about the street gangs. They're low level compared to the pharmaceutical companies that make OxyContin. Can anyone explain to me why the manufacturer of OxyContin is not in handcuffs? I can answer the question, because their names are on the board of every museum in the world. They bought their way to the top, as has been said many times and many different ways. In America, what is red in the first generation becomes red, white, and blue in the third generation. In other words, that built on blood then becomes patriotic 2 generations later. It's sickening to me that those who manufacture OxyContin are not stopped. Tell me why, if let's say they're making 1 billion, let's say there's 1 billion prescriptions for drugs a year. I'm making up a number. 1 billion prescriptions for OxyContin, and each prescription contains 10 pills. So that's 10 billion pills. And the company that makes it is making 30 billion pills. Tell me why the family in charge of that company is not in prison. Answer. Why? Take a look at your Congress and you'll have your answer. That's all. What do you think a lobbyist is? So here is a president who has never had a drink and doesn't smoke, who should be a role model if we had other than what we have in the media, which are sewer rats disguised as objective reporters. It's sickening to me. He is a great role model, but because of the sewer rats in the media, they turn him into Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. You throw in anyone you want. And that is because most of the people in the media are drug addicts. I don't think you understand to what extent drug addiction pervades the media. All right, so here we go. I'm not going to say like Mr. Preacher telling you you're evil if you use drugs. To me, it's not a matter of good or evil. It's a matter of whether you want to be an addict or not. I don't put a moral judgment on drug use. It doesn't make you dirty or evil. What it makes you is an addict. And the whole question now is the president comes out and says, okay, we got an opioid crisis, which Obama never admitted. And he's attacked for saying we have an opioid crisis by not having done more. That's the best Wolf Blitzer could do, who should have been a tie salesman in the garment district instead of sitting on television making believe he's an objective reporter. But there's no point in my yelling about Wolf Blitzer. It's not going to change anything any more than it is yelling about drugs and drug addiction. What good is it? Tell me what good it's going to do. So the president says that he's going to do something about it. What is he going to do about it? What can he possibly do? Throw more money at the problem? You and I both know the treatment rarely works. The recidivism rate is overwhelming. Top 8 countries consuming illegal drugs. I gave you 3 or 4. Top 3. 1, Iran, heroin. 14% of the per capita uses heroin. Iran, would you believe that? I know you wouldn't have guessed it because I didn't. I thought the U.S. would have been at the top of the list. Number 2, United Kingdom, alcohol. 13% of them are drunks, and they don't want treatment. Also, UK is reportedly a major consumer of Southwest Asian heroin and Latin American coke. So much for England. Number 3, French, no longer wine. Now it's painkillers, mainly benzos and methadone. That's France. You know, well, let's save it for another show. Number 4, roll of the mental drum, Slovakia. They like inhalants. No wonder they're so intelligent. Slovakia, inhalants, 13% of the per capita. Mainly inhalants, toluene, in other words, like nail polish remover. No, I mean, has Slovakia produced anything of any note? They have a car, nothing. A clothing line? Isn't there any Slovakian clothing? Nothing. Well, if you inhale nail polish, I guess the nation isn't going to produce anything. Slovakia's main concern with drug-related use and addiction has to do with inhalants. The culprit is a thinner-like, colorless inhalant known as toluene. Causes death and uses blah, blah, blah. Toluene. Okay, so now, pain thinner. That's really gross. What a nation. How'd that happen? Russia, number 5, booze, 7.1% of the population. Alcohol, mainly vodka. Research, most of the 25% of Russian men who don't reach the age of 55 die from alcohol-related causes. Liver disease, alcohol poisoning, alcohol influence accidents, violence, or even suicide, affecting negatively the overall lifespan of the average Russian. All right. But that's not the only problem in Russia. They spend more on illegal drugs in a year than the annual budget of the Ministry of Defense in Russia. Can you believe this? Aside from booze, heroin also constitutes a major problem in Russia. And that's because they have a porous border with Afghanistan, where the upstream heroin drug trade originates, period. Number 6, roll the mental drums. Afghanistan, heroin, 6.9% per capita use heroin. And it's worth mentioning to you that Afghanistan is the leading producer of poppy opium. It's reported that up to 50% of opium-using parents also give the drug to their children. Wow. Oh, my God. Okay, number 7 on the list of addiction nations. Are you interested in this? I mean, I make believe it's a graduate seminar in drug use because, I almost said Obama. I meant Trump. I can't, it's like a blur now. I almost said Nixon. I could have said Eisenhower. Whoever the current president is, Trump, said that he's going to, I'm sorry, said he's going to do something about the opioid problem. Okay, number 7 on the list, roll the drums in your head. Canada, they're addicted to marijuana. That figures with the ballerina running the country. 6.4% of the nation is addicted to marijuana. I think that's good to know because what you don't know is that marijuana is the most addictive of all drugs. And although you have been brainwashed into thinking it is benign and healthful, it is the exact opposite. It is an entry-level drug. Mark my words, in your lifetime, you will see marijuana controlled again by a future government. It doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or socialist government. Marijuana will eventually be made a drug that will be controlled again because it's destroying too many children. Number 8 on the list is the United States addicted to prescription pills. 6.2% per capita addicted to pills, painkillers. And what's the number 1? Opioid abuse. More alarming statistic comes from someone who states that almost 5,500 people start to misuse prescription painkillers every day. And we all know the stories. Back injury, neck injury, surgery. They give you the Oxy, and bingo, the next thing you know, you got scabs on your face and you're on a show called Intervention. And your family's crying in a hotel room next door. And you come in and there they are. There's Mother Jane and Father Joe weeping about what a great girl you are, and they don't know how it happened. And then they show you the baby pictures, and you were twirling a baton in high school. In college, you were on the chess team. The next thing you knew, I don't know, you slipped and fell and hurt your knee, and the next thing you know, you're a junkie. I can make a joke of it. I know it's not a joke. Now call up the proper authority. And I made a joke and it hurt you. It personally offended you. Okay? Call Harvey Weinstein. Maybe he can help you. Everything offends somebody. I have a sarcastic way of dealing with things. It's the only way I can get through life. And if that offends you, I can't help it. Then turn on a show that's not offensive, if you can find one. To me, the most offensive shows are the ones that pretend that they're not biased. They offend me more than the ones that are biased. Because I'll take an overt bias any day. At least I know where the guy's coming from. As opposed to guys that pretend they're not biased. They're the most snake. The biggest snakes of all. How do you treat it? What would you do to treat the opioid problem? That's what the president says he's going to do. I don't know what he's going to do. Where's the sound sheet? I hear it. All right, so I knew that Mr. Trump never used alcohol, never used cigarettes, which I thought was fantastic. What a strong man he really is. Really strong guy. I don't know anyone who, by the way, doesn't use alcohol. I don't know one person. I drink. I drink every night. It's rarely a night goes by that I do not have a drink. I don't consider myself an addict for one reason, and that is I never drink during a day. I think in my entire life I've had maybe one drink during a daytime. I don't drink till after the sun goes down, and at this point, I usually have maximum 2, maybe 2.5 ounces. At most. And it's funny, I was told by an alcoholic that I could never be an alcoholic because I have a chemical feedback mechanism. In other words, when I've had enough, which is after about 2 ounces, 2 drinks, I get a feedback mechanism where the drink I'm having doesn't taste good anymore and I don't want it. That's a natural kickback mechanism. I just don't want it anymore. And I was told that alcoholics have no such feedback mechanism, that once they start, they can't stop. And they drink until they're, oblivious. So I'm not worried about it. So I have my own. And some days I just don't want to drink. I'm too tired. My good friend Lorenzo told me 20 years ago, he said, never ever drink when you're tired. It's a very good rule, by the way. A lot of people come into a restaurant, they're tired, they have a glass of wine. Worst thing you could do. The worst thing you could do is have a drink when you're tired. Absolute worst thing you could do. But getting back to the issue of the feedback mechanism, in many cases, drug addiction is a chemical problem. In many cases, it's just simply a lifestyle choice. And I don't have the simple answer. I'd be sitting like a fool to tell you I have the answer. I don't have the answers. Too many people involved, too many different reasons, too many real cases of severe pain that can't be controlled for me to sit here like a moron and tell you I have the simple answer. I mean, we're just talking about the problem, which is about all I can do right now. So who do you blame for the drug epidemic? Well, everybody. It's that simple. Blame everybody but the president. Now, Nancy Reagan, to her credit, had a campaign called Just Say No. It had some effect upon an entire generation who learned to just say no to the scum of the earth who were trying to get him to try a marijuana cigarette or a little cocaine or God knows what else. It worked to a certain extent. It probably saved a lot of lives. So now we have a president who was a conservative who was being attacked by the sigmoid colognes in his own party. That's actually elevating him too high up the channel. But since this is a family show, I will call them the sigmoid colons of the body politic. I'd rather call him something else. Can you imagine that his own party is acting like worse than his worst enemies? Well, I'm shocked by it, right? I didn't write about it in Trump's War. I think I'll tell you one minute, for 1 second now, at the risk of your displeasure, what I predicted in Trump's War, which is, what did I say? I said Trump faces relentless opposition from special interests in both parties who stand to lose trillions if Trump's America First policies become the law of the land. Not only will Trump have to overcome progressive ideologues, neoconservative ventriloquists, I think you know who they are. They're part of the cartel that keeps me off certain television shows because they're afraid of my intellect, my intelligence, my education, and my power. Connected corporate interests and a military-industrial complex bent on permanent war. He will also have to fight progressive beliefs even he and his otherwise conservative appointees have unwittingly accepted. But there's an entire chapter in Trump's war about the Republican Party. So trust me, this is nothing new. Chapter 8 is entitled Trump's War Against the Rhinos, the Party versus the People, Republican Trade Traitors, a wall or a fence or a virtual wall. So, trust me, I see it coming, saw it coming, knew it was coming. I'm not simply an apologist for Donald Trump. I'm an apologist for America. So if that's my deficit, then sue me for it. And what you actually don't understand is that Trump is probably your best friend because he's the most American president we've had in so long. Imperfect, yes. Not giving us what we want on the right, for sure. Maybe 20, 25% of what we want, but who expected more? He doesn't have unilateral powers as Obama did because Obama was special. As you understand, the rules that applied to America for the hundreds of years that we've been a country did not apply to Obama because he was special. He was a saint. He won a Nobel Prize before he was born, apparently, and when he was selected to be president, long before he was even a teenager, by the secret hands that run everything. You see, we had 8 straight years of being pulled almost into the world of overt, if not outright, socialism, but that's too soft a word. It was very close to a muted form of communism and a dictatorship that Obama dragged us into. And if you think I'm using hyperbole, you're mistaken. I normally do use a lot of hyperbole. But even the ACLU was disgusted with Barry Obama, who they said, and they hushed this up pretty quickly in the media, Obama created the greatest surveillance state in the history of the world, far outdoing that of communist Russia, spying on every American. And that was done by the nice old Barry Obama, Mr. Good Guy, the man who was so slick at lying that he told you he didn't like millionaires and billionaires when those are the only people he hung around with. And the minute he got out of office, he took a $70 million deal for a book, and then flew around with that character from England with Virgin Airways. I guess he was another millionaire and billionaire who was not on the list of hated. Him and the old lady hung out with him. It's all a lie, don't you understand that? Barack Obama sowed racial enmity in this nation for 8 straight years. That's how he became president. Did he, correct me if I'm mistaken, but before he was president, did he cure polio, or was he the man who discovered the cure for leukemia? Or was Obama an astronaut who went to Mars? Or was Obama a man who won a Nobel Prize for something? He was a nobody, a zero, an invention, a creation of the radical left that cultivated him for years and years and years in Hawaii and then at Columbia. They picked him. They handpicked him. He was the perfect man for the time to push the anti-American agenda. And he spent 8 straight years doing what got him where he was, which was dividing people, turning first against the police in Boston, if you remember. You remember that? Obama sowed the seeds of racial enmity in this country for 8 straight years with his henchman, Eric Holder. One after the other, they turned race against race, sex against sex, old against young. You know, in this country, if you're poor and you pass a traffic light, you get a ticket. If you're poor and you steal a pencil from a supermarket, you can get arrested, probably beaten up with a nightstick somewhere in the back of the supermarket, first by a security guard, and then you're arrested for resisting arrest. If you are rich in America and you commit enough crimes, then you show the aptitude to become a politician. And then you start the long road up. And it depends upon how many crimes you have gotten away with to attract the attention of those at the top. Because if you get away with enough big crimes, they'll say this person has the aptitude to be a congressman. Now, if you get away with crimes that approach treason, you're right in the Senate. Then the big party bosses come to visit you, and the world opens up. First, you get a job on the news, in the news media. You're seen as a brilliant talking head, and people think that you're put there because you're so smart or good looking, but you're actually put there by the CIA. You know how many people are working for the CIA in the media right now? I wouldn't know, but I guarantee a lot of them are there because they have no ratings, and yet they're on CNN and MSNBC. Why are they there? Why are they there? Why do they give some of them glasses, fake glasses, when they don't even have astigmatism to make them look intelligent, when they're just script readers like Jon Stewart? You tell me why. But the biggest question of the day, which ties into the secret hands behind it all, it's not that I believe in the black hand. I believe in the secret hands that control everything. I believe that when Plato wrote, "The shadows on the wall are all we're seeing," Plato was right. He saw it in ancient Greece. We don't actually see what's going on. We don't even see the puppets. All we see are the shadows of the puppets. So we don't really know. We're seeing triangulations of triangulations.
Susie Orman here, and I have a very special message for all federal employees affected by the government shutdown. This will be the first time in the history of my entire career that I am telling anybody to even consider this. But if you don't have the money to pay your bills, then you might want to consider taking a loan from your retirement account. You can listen to more on a very special bonus episode of the Women in Money podcast, free now at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.